Which shoe is better to hoop in? The Nike LeBron 20 or the Nike PG6? Let's do it. Welcome back to our channel. Today we're checking out the most recent shoes to release from LeBron and Paul George's signature lines with Nike. But before I get into breaking these models down for performance, we'll look at some of the basic info first. So whenever it comes to price, we actually have the widest gap possible between these shoes today. The LeBron 20 is Nike's most expensive signature shoe, retailing for $200, while the PG6 is Nike's cheapest signature shoe, retailing for $110. So pretty much like cut in half like the price of the LeBron 20 is going to land you with this PG6. So we are going to have to keep that price gap in mind while we're doing this review. But taking a quick look at the appearance for both of these models, I'll actually start off with the LeBron 20s because these clearly have like a whole new look. Like this is a lower release than LeBron's like normally come out as. Most of his shoes in his line are going to be like high tops. Sometimes they sprinkle in some mids, but I prefer to play in low top shoes. So honestly, I do like this change. And then on the outer side of the upper, you're going to see two Nike swooshes sort of like overlapping. And the gold swoosh runs around the back and actually comes off of the shoe. And that kind of gives these that unfinished look. I think it's super clean. Now on the inside of the upper, on the inner side of the upper, you're just going to see a purple swoosh with some cool orange stitching on there. And then this is the first shoe in a while that LeBron has released in his line where you actually can't see the cushioning units through that midsole. And that's honestly something I do kind of miss because, you know, I think that's a cool part about his shoe. And then as for the tongue on these, you're actually going to see LeBron's signature with two X's on there to mark out the number 20 for this year's model. Those X's also show up at the bottom of the lacing system too. And then the last thing I'll touch on is the heel. You're going to have a yellow patch back there with LeBron's crown logo. And then along with that is going to be those two X's again. So honestly, this is a really sweet looking shoe. Definitely one of my favorites out there right now. But now switching it over to look at the PG6. After having a pretty simple look on the PG5s last year that I got up here over my shoulder, you know, Nike did give these a whole new setup. And I think it looks really nice. Like I like the reverse swoosh that they throw on the upper for the PG6. It shows up in gold on this colorway. And then just below that on the midsole, you can actually see the player logo for Paul George kind of like running up the side from the bottom of the shoe and like bleeding onto the midsole. I think that's honestly a pretty cool look there. And then on the tongue, you're going to see his signature. The inner side of the upper is going to have like a forward facing swoosh. And these remind me a lot of like this year's KD 15 model because that's pretty much the same exact setup, but more so just like the look to the upper, but it's just flipped. Like it's just reverse swoosh on the outside or on the inside of the KD 15. Then on the outside, you got like that forward facing swoosh. But I mean, the last spot that I'll draw out on this model is going to be the heel. You can see the number 13 that shows up for his jersey number on the Clippers. So some nice details going on for both of these shoes. Now let's go and see how they hold up on it. So now getting into more of the materials and the performance side and starting off with the cushioning. Before I talk about, you know, like the on-court feel, I'll just give you the cushioning setup for each shoe first. So for the LeBron 20, instead of like labeling on the shoe directly what's being used, they did it a little bit different this year. Inside of the shoebox comes this like this little card that honestly looks like it comes from like a playing card set, and it pretty much breaks down everything that's being used within the shoe just for all of the cushioning. So I'll just kind of run down the list for you really quick. On top is going to be some Cushlon foam, and that is pretty common whenever you're dealing with a LeBron shoe. Then underneath that is going to be an air zoom unit that looks to be in the forefoot and in the heel. Then you're going to have a nice carbon fiber midfoot shank on there to help keep the model intact. There's also a lateral guardrail, so just plenty of cushioning features going into this year's LeBron 20 model. As for the PG6, these are going to have some Nike React technology in the midsole, and that's just a lightweight and durable foam that is meant to deliver a soft and responsive feel. So on the surface, it does kind of seem like the LeBron 20 would play a lot softer than the PG6 just due to the sheer amount of cushioning features kind of packed into the LeBron 20. But these do have a really similar feel on the court the more that I play in both of these models. Like the PG6 and the LeBron 20 are going to give you a balanced cushioning setup. The forefoot and the heel, they feel about the same. And both of these models are going to have a really padded like sock liner, just like collar kind of wrapping around your ankle area. Like it's really nice. It's definitely thick on both shoes. You can tell they just stuffed that collar to help enhance the comfort a little bit more. Then on both of these shoes, I mean, both of their lines are kind of like, you know, more so known for having comfortable models. Like I know LeBron's signature line, they've been putting a premium on cushioning for a while now. And honestly, every shoe that I've played in from PG's line, those have felt really good too, especially like, you know, the memory foam setup that was used in last year's PG5 model. And then using our durometer to check out the midsole, that Cushlon foam on the LeBron 20 is reading pretty much right on the average at 39.5, while the React foam from the PG6 is going to come in a little bit softer at 33.5. So whenever I'm dealing with shoes, you know, don't have like a bouncy unit in the forefoot, I normally like shift my focus just to seeing how deep that cushioning feels in the foot, like the foot bed just directly underneath your foot. Like if it feels thinner on the, or like having an initial layer, or if the impact protection feels really, you know, just more so padded. And both of these shoes are going to fall on the more padded side, and that's always nice to see. For materials and support, both shoes switch some things up from their previous models, especially in LeBron's line. So looking at the LeBron 20s first, like I said, like these don't even look like they came from the same shoe line. The LeBron 19s just had a lot more moving pieces for this section. Like, I mean, they had a full-length inner sleeve, some overlays. You're not going to see quite as much of that on this year's LeBron 20 model. Like, the upper is going to be more of like a knit or a mesh that is noticeably more thin. Like, I mean, the LeBron 19 had layers kind of built into that shoe, but that's also one thing that made them so heavy. But I mean, with all the materials, it really didn't show up on this model to hurt the weight. That also does mean those same features won't be there to necessarily help with the support. Like, with these being on the lighter side, I was kind of hoping for some extra support features to be added on, and you just really don't get a ton. Like, there's no outrigger on the LeBron 20, no midfoot band, no overlays to like for the laces to feed through. All of that was there on last year's model, and I do feel a little bit of give to the upper whenever I'm making those harder cuts, but it's not terrible. Like, I mean, they're still definitely more secure than the LeBron 18 was from a few models back, and I wouldn't call the support great, not compared to having all of those extra pieces that were on the 19s, but I mean, it is tough for a shoe to get better in every way. Normally something has to give. But now switching it over to look at the PG6, these are going to get a mesh upper that helps keep these really breathable and lightweight. And you're also going to have some no-so overlays on top of that, and it's kind of tough to see on this colorway. Like, picking an all black colorway wasn't very smart whenever I'm like trying to draw out certain parts on a shoe. But the toe is going to be a different texture compared to the middle portion. Then around the heel and like the ankle is going to be more of a plush feel. I mean, you know, these are $110, so they don't feel cheap. They also don't have anything premium going on. And as for the support, you know, the PG5, it had an outrigger on there to brace your foot and stuff like that, but the PG6 did lose that. There are still going to be some forefoot straps integrated into the laces to give you a more secure feel. And these are played really nice. Like, I just haven't had any issues at all keeping my foot stable in the PG6. And it's also going to be a super light shoe too, with the size 10.5 only weighing 392 grams. The LeBron 20 is going to be a little bit over that, weighing 434 grams for the same size, but I do have to give some props to Nike for shaving off nearly 200 grams from the LeBron 19s last year. Those things were heavy, but both of these shoes are going to be on the lighter side. I'm always a fan of that. To finish off with traction, both models did switch up what they were using a little bit, so I'll kind of give you a look at the patterns before I talk about how they play. So for the PG6, these are going to have a rubber outsole that is meant to provide multi-directional traction to help you stay in control. You can see this just have some like circles and some lines as the pattern. And then for the LeBron 20, this is just going to be another random pattern like we normally see from his line. They don't really dive into the details much on it. So this is kind of a tale of two stories, at least over the last few years whenever you're dealing with LeBron and PG signature lines for traction alone. Like, the PG5s were amazing last year. Like, they used the same exact traction pattern from the Kobe 9s, and they played great. They do have more of a unique look to this year's setup, but they still perform really well. Like, I'd say maybe a hair less grip compared to last year's model, but nowhere near weakness on this PG6 model for the traction. And then as for LeBron's line, the 18s and the 19s were just like, they were kind of rough. They didn't have a lot of bite to them, and they just weren't very consistent to play in. But as for the LeBron 20, they flipped that narrative on its head. Like, Nike must have used like something different whenever they were putting together this outsole material, because these are straight up sticky. And how traction can go from being one of the worst parts of a shoe to the highlight out of nowhere is pretty impressive. So I do love that for this year's LeBron 20. And then to finish off with sizing, the PG6 is going to be a touch longer than the LeBron 20. I do feel a little bit leftover room there, just some extra space for the length on the PG6, but the width is going to be pretty standard on these shoes. I definitely wouldn't call either model wide though. So for the final ratings and starting off with the appearance, I like the reverse swoosh on the Nike PG6, but if I had to choose, which I guess I do, I really do like the new look to LeBron's line. Like the Nike swoosh running off the shoe, it's not very functional, but I think it looks cool. So I'm going to start off with the LeBron 20. And looking at the cushioning, I mean, it is going to be the same balance setup for both of these shoes. The LeBron 20 does have more stuff being used, it seems, but I mean, you get the same type of feel on the PG6. It's going to be a softer footbed with some really nice, you know, padding around the sock liner. So the gap isn't wide enough for me to choose a side, for me to lean towards LeBron's side especially. So I'm just going to go with the tie here. Looking at the materials, the LeBron 20 is a $200 pair of shoes. I do want to bring that back to the forefront of our mind, because that honestly does matter. And with the $200, they just didn't add a ton of pieces here, like no overlays, straps, cables, all of that was on last year's LeBron 19. But the PG6 just isn't a very flashy shoe either with those pieces, so I'm just going to go with the tie for that section. For support though, that's a clear spot to the LeBron 20. It did get a little bit worse. Like all those overlays and straps that I was just talking about, they didn't make it onto the shoe to help like keep them light, which does help keep them lighter. But I mean, that thinner material on the upper, I would have just liked to see a little bit more going on. You do have some forefoot straps kind of working on the PG6 though. Gives you a more sturdy upper, so I'm going to lean PG6 for support. And then to finish off with traction, LeBron's line did not win very many of these last year, but they are going to go ahead and win this traction category over the PG6, which is still good. It's just not quite as much bite. So I'm not going to lie, this one's really tough. And for that reason, I have to go with the Nike PG6 as my better shoe to hoop in. Now I say it like that for a reason. For performance alone, I mean, these are pretty much like the same exact. Like, I give a slight edge to the PG6 for support, a slight edge to the Lebron 20 for traction. Pretty much everywhere else they're like even, essentially. Like, that would normally lead to a tie for these models, but whenever, for me, I guess, whenever I had the option to choose between a shoe that costs $200 and a shoe that costs $110, I mean, I'm gonna have to go with the $110 shoe. And I definitely like the Lebron 20 a lot, but you're almost asking the shoe to be perfect whenever it comes to that retail price. Like, the PG6 is honestly one of those shoes that just doesn't have a weakness. It's also the lighter model, so that factors in a little bit, but don't get me wrong, I still like both of these shoes as performance models. It's more so gonna come down to what you're wanting to spend. Thank you guys for taking some time to watch. Feel free to drop a follow or subscribe if you like this video, and if you're interested in buying the Nike PG6 and you want to support our channel, just click the link here on screen, or we have links for both shoes down below in our bio, so feel free to check that out. But until next review, I'm Man from Shoewear. Peace.